So in this video we'll be talking about everyone's favourite topic in maths, looking at fractions, and we'll be discussing how to write and find the fraction of an amount using both non-calculator and calculator methods. So working out fractions of amounts is an important skill that you really need to master and understand. They can appear on both the non-calculator or calculator problems or exam papers, however the method is pretty much the same for both. Now I can't stress this enough, is that particularly when dealing with fractions, it's really important with it, like with any maths question, that you read the question carefully. And even as a maths teacher, I can sometimes, if I'm in a rush, if I'm not concentrating, can just simply misinterpret what the question is asking me by guessing what it's asking me basing on what things I can see. So what numbers I can see, what format it's written. I just think, right, okay, that's what you do because I've been doing 300 other similar problems to that, but then actually the question's asking me for something else, and that's the reason why I'm getting it wrong, is because I've not read the question carefully. So always take that extra little bit of time just to make sure that you're understanding what it is you're actually being asked to find. So in terms of a refresh, so now there's a difference between finding the fraction of amount and writing the fraction of amount. So for example, with these two questions, now what's written in the red box is something that I definitely would make a note of in your notes or revision cards or whatever you're making, as what is writing the fraction of amount. So what you want to do is, the general fraction is basically how many you have over the total amount, and then if it's possible, what you want to do is simplify that fraction or write an equivalent fraction that's obviously using smaller numbers. So an example of this particular type of question, as you can see in question 1, it says what fraction, write the fraction that is shaded. So here we can count that we have, I'll get a different colour pen. So with question 1, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 that is shaded, and I've got a total of 20 squares. Now with 8 over 20, now that is the fraction that is shaded, and again sometimes a question might ask you how much is not shaded. So here shaded is 8/20, what not shaded will be 12/20, and obviously from this what I then want to do to gain full marks is I can simplify this fraction, because I ask myself what number goes into both 8 and 20, that'll be 4, so it'll be 2/5, and there is my final answer. For question 2, it says that a bag contains 32 counters. So a bag contains 32 counters coloured red and green. If there are 20 red counters, what fraction are A red and B green? So here we've got A. So we've got a total of 32 counters in total, and we know 20 of them are red. So then I just go on to the process of what number goes into, can I simplify this fraction? Well, yes I can, because they're both even for starters. So I then think to myself, what's the biggest number that goes into both? In this case it's going to be 4 again. So how many 4s go into 20? That will be 5. How many 4s go into 32? That would be 8, and there is the answer for A. Now for B, let's use green for this, for the obvious reason. For B, we're looking at how many green counters there are. Well, again, there are a total of 32 counters. Now, if 20 of them are green, then all I've got to do is 32 take away 20, which is 12. And then I want to see, can I simplify this fraction? Well, again, I can, because they're both even. So what number goes into both 12 and 32? Well, that will be 4. So here we've got how many 4s go into 12? That would be 3. And how many 4s go into 32? That would be 8. And there we go. Now also we could then, if we were being a little bit on the ball, if we know that there's either red or green counters and 5/8 are red, then how many parts are left out of the 8? That's going to be 3. So I could have got to the answer of 3/8 a lot quicker. But again, if you want to go back to basics and just treat section B as a completely different question, then that's absolutely fine. But the key thing to remember is this set of format, and also making sure that you do simplify where possible. You could lose marks, even if it's worth 1 mark, if you don't simplify your fractions, and that's something that you start off right from primary school all the way up to A level. It's just expected that if you can simplify a fraction, you simplify it. So let's move on to finding the fraction of an amount. So this is where you actually want to find the physical amount. Now the general concept, and again this is something that I would definitely copy up in your notes, is these 2 steps. Now generally speaking, a question will usually be written, you'll get a fraction and it says of an amount, and so it's usually set in this format that you can see. I'm just going to highlight on the screen here. So you've got a fraction, so you've got a numerator, denominator, and an actual amount. Now to work the fraction of an amount, what we do is we divide by the amount by the denominator, and then you multiply the answer by the numerator. Now it is possible that you could multiply by the numerator, the amount by the numerator first, and then divide by the denominator, and you will still come out with the same answer. So in some questions, as long as you are dividing by the denominator, multiplying by the numerator, you're going to be absolutely fine. Just don't get the two confused. What you don't want to be doing is multiplying by the denominator and dividing by the numerator, because that's a whole different question. So, and in some cases, particularly with non-calculator methods, you might find that it's easier to multiply first and then divide, and in some cases, most cases I would say, it's probably going to be easier to divide first and then multiply, because obviously you want to try and divide with the smallest number rather than a big number to make it easier for yourself. So let's have a look at these three examples. So again, I've got my fraction, which is 2/3, and I've got my amount, which is £18. So again, I'm just going to stress the obvious. So there's my fraction, and this is my amount. So let me use different colour pen. So here I'm going to do, the first thing I'm going to do, so if I just write #1, I'm going to do 18 divided by 3, which is 6, and then #2, I'm going to multiply the answer, which is 6, by the numerator, which is 2, which so gives me an answer of 12. So the answer for this is going to be £12, not forgetting the units. So for question 2, again, #1 is I'm going to divide 240 divided by 8, and that gives me an answer of 30. And then #2, I then want to do the answer, which is 30, times 5, which is 150, and that's going to be there in terms of kilometres. Now again, if you're not great with your dividing, again, just do 8 over 240, do the bus stop method. So how many 8's going to 2? 0, carry the 2. How many 8's going to 24? That would be 3. And I've got no remainder, giving me a total answer of 30. So you can always, again, depending on how good you are with your multiplying and your times tables, you'll get to the answer quicker. But again, you want to get the question right, so don't be lazy. If you don't know the answer, find a way to work it out. And then finally for question 3, again here we're going to do #1, so we're going to divide 60 divided by 12, which is 5. And then step 2 is we're going to multiply the answer, which is 5, by the numerator, which is 7, giving me an answer of 35, and the units are kilograms. So moving on to another type of question. So here we've got a worded question. So again, this is really, when you've got worded problems, one, they're usually at a high level, but two, it involves you breaking down the question to make it easier for you to do. So question 4, it says a box contains 24 cans of pop, 3/8 are cola, 1/4 are lemonade, and the rest are orangeade. And the question's asking is, for the first part for A, is how many cans are cola, lemonade, and orangeade. So let's have a look at question A first. So we've got a total of 24. So with A, I want to work out what 3/8 of 24 are. So 3/8, I'm going to do 24 divided by 8, which is 3, and then 3 times 3, which is 9. So therefore, there are 9 cans of cola. Then for part 2, I want to work out 1/4 of 24. So, and that is a 4, not a 9. So again, I'm going to do 24 divided by 4, which is 6, and I'm going to do 6 times 1, which is 6. So therefore, 6 cans of lemonade. And then part 3, well, there's a couple of ways in which I could do this. Probably the easiest way is saying, well, if there's 24 cans, how many cans are left? Well, it's going to be 24 minus 9 minus 6, which is going to give me 9 cans. So it's 9 cans of orangeade. And there we go. Now for part B, it's then saying what fraction are orangeade. Well, again, that's going to be 9 over 24. Again, let's make sure I'm writing so it's a little like an A. What we're going for, red. And again, what we then want to do is make sure that we are simplifying. So is there a number that goes into both 9 and 24? Yes, there is. We could divide both numbers by 3, in which we get 3/8, and there is your final answer. So it's important that you recognising the question. It can be mixed, and like I said, always try and show you're working out. But usually, generally speaking, depending on what level you're working at, it might only be worth 1 mark. So it's just a case of this, and you can feel free to do some of the simple questions in your head. As long as the answer is correct, you should get full marks. So let's have a look at finding the fraction of amount using a calculator. Now, when using a calculator, we can use a non-calculator method, so we can always go back to dividing by the denominator, multiplying by the numerator, remembering to press equals in between, or you can use a fraction button that appears on all scientific calculators, and we can use this button to do the calculation for us. Now, on your scientific calculator, I would say that you're usually going to have one of these two buttons. You definitely won't have both. A lot of the older calculators will have what you can see as the ABC button, and a lot of the newer sort of Casio calculators will have what I call the fraction button, which again is going to be on one of the scientific areas of your scientific calculator. So it's always important you have a look at finding one of these two buttons. So let's have a look at some example questions, and let's show you how we can actually how we can use the calculator to work these out in itself. And what you'll find is that with calculator questions, the dividing is going to be a lot more complicated, so you'll be using a lot more complicated, bigger numbers. You might also incorporate using decimal numbers as well. And again, these questions will generally be worth 1 mark, simply because it's just one thing on your calculator, pressing equals, and boom, you've got your answer. So if you've got the Casio calculators, let's show you how you can enter this on there. Now here I've got my Casio calculator. I'm going to work with question 1. So first thing I'm going to do is press the fraction button, and I'm going to enter the fraction. So I've got 7, 8. Now this is the most important thing. You've got to scroll across. Now of in maths, when you're working out the amount, means times, and then I'm going to enter the amount, so 12. Now the important thing is make sure if you press equals, I get an answer of 10.5. So the answer for this one is going to be £10.50. Now, although don't try not to write 10.5, because it's dealing with money, we want to make sure we're writing with 2 decimal places, so it's £10.50. Now, if you've got one of the ABC buttons, and all we need to do is press 7, then press the ABC button, then press 8, and then press times, and then 12, and again you should come up with 10.5. Worst case scenario, another alternative you can do is just do 7 divided by 8 in brackets, and then multiply that by 12, press equals, and again you'll get 10.5 as your answer. And again, because we're dealing with money, make sure you're writing your answers to 2 decimal places, and again, don't forget to write your units. So again, with question 2, if I just put a little separator through this. So again, I'm going to get my calculator, and now the key thing is, and as you can see, what I want to do is when I'm doing this, I want to make sure that I'm paying attention to what I'm actually typing in on my calculator. What I'm saying is, what I don't want to do is enter as you can see on my screen, that I've made a mistake because my 1240 is attached to my denominator. Now if I press equals, it's going to give me a ridiculously crazy number, as you can see on the calculator on the screen now. So it's obvious I've made a mistake. So don't always, now the general theme, quote I always say is your calculator's only as clever as the buttons you press. So not your calculator's fault that's doing it wrong, it's because you've not learned how to use your calculator correctly and how to enter it correctly as well. So we're going to do 4, scroll across down to 15, and then we're going to scroll across, times by 1240, press equals. Now this now slowly starts to look like a bit of a correct answer, and so here we get 130.666 recurring. So the answer to this question is 300, and I forgot what the answer was, 330.6 recurring, or we can write this as 330.67 to 2 decimal places, or we can round this up to 330.7 to 1 decimal place. And again, don't forget the units, which I've done. So I'm just going to squeeze in like so. So either of these answers would be absolutely fine, and what you'll find is that if they do want you to round, they will tell you in the question. If not, always state, like I've done here, what you're going to round it up to. So if you want to round it to the nearest whole number, that's fine, but just make sure you write down that you've rounded it up to the nearest whole number. Don't leave your answer as, let's say, 331. And if you're doing it 2dp, write 2dp. If you're doing 1dp, do 1dp. And if you want to just copy and play it safe by copying the answer that's on your calculator again, that's fine. But if a question does specify for you to round your answers and you did copy the exact number, obviously you would lose a mark for doing that. So let's just go on to question 3 now. So again, I'm going to get my calculator and I'm going to enter, press the fraction button, not twice. So I've got 7, 12, and make sure again, scrolling across, times by 540, press equals, and I get a nice number of 315. So here, let's get rid of that highlighter. And see here I get an answer of 315 kilograms. Your answer for these should always be smaller than your amounts. So again, if you've gone wrong and you get a number like 0. something, then you know you've gone wrong somewhere. If your answer is bigger than the actual amount, then again, alarm bell should be ringing that you've done the wrong thing. So make sure you learn how to use your calculator correctly. So let's just have a look now at some extension questions. So once you've mastered that, you might get some of these more complicated questions. That all really depends on the interpretation, how you read the question. So let's have a look. So in question 1 it says 4/5 of a number is 12. What is the number? So here we're not given the whole total amount. We only know what the fraction amount is. So this is like what we call a reverse question. So this is where the answer is 12 and we want to work out what the whole number is. Now, to break this question up, we know that we've got a total of 5 parts. And we know from this question that 4 parts equals 12. Now, we want to know, we know that how many, let's get this right. We know that there's 4 parts equals 12, and the answer is how many are 5 parts. So for this, we need to work out what 1 part is. So therefore, 1 part is going to equal 12 divided by 4, which is 3. And so if 1 part equals 3, we then want to work out what 5 parts are. So that's going to be 5 times 3. So the answer is going to equal 15. So although you won't necessarily need to write down everything that I've written in that part, it's your understanding that key thing. So this is the number of parts. So 4 parts equals 12, and I want to work out how many are 5 parts. Now going on to question 2, I don't know why it's labelled as question 1, so let me just quickly correct that. There we go. So here we've got a question of that 3/8 of a number is 15, find a quarter of that number. So for this, what we need to do is first of all find, so the first thing we need to do is find the original number, which is basically exactly what we did in the first question, and then step 2 is then we then need to find a quarter of this number. And they're the 2 steps that we need to do to find the answer to this question. So doing this question, we know that the total is 8 parts, and we know that 3 parts equals 15. So if 3 parts is 15, then 1 part is going to equal 5. So therefore, that the total, or the original number, is going to be 8 times 5, which is 40. So that's the original number that we're working with. Now the questions are asking us to find the original number, it's asking us to find a quarter of that number. So what we then need to do is then work out a quarter of 40. So again, I'm going to do 40 divided by 4, which is 10, and then we do 10 times 1, which is 10, and there is your final answer. So again, just to summarise, it's really important you understand the concept of fractions. How to work out the amount is usually the same, and the key thing is make sure you read the questions carefully, because like I said, they can be asking you for complete different things. Sometimes they might ask you to find the fraction of something, but it might say to find out the fraction that is not what they've told you. So always make sure you do read the question carefully.